All right. I hope you're still with us. Thank you for staying with us up to this moment. And it's Good Morning Nigeria on the network service. So reports are indicating that the United Arab Emirates is planning to walk away from the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, and of course OPEC Plus from May the 1st. That's tomorrow.
Well, in the midst of this, the World Bank warns commodity prices could surge back towards 2022 highs.
And if that happens, well, we probably will be looking at a market where supply discipline weakens, while geopolitical tension, of course, like the situation around Iran, pushes prices upward.
And the UAE says it wants more control over its outputs and long-term strategy. But the real question is whether this cracks OPEC's cohesion or simply reshapes it.
Either way, for producers like Nigeria, this could mean higher revenues on paper, but also more volatility and tougher policy choices back home, or what in IT we call at the back end. Am I correct?
Yeah, back end, yeah.
At the back end.
Well, to further discuss developments in OPEC as the UAE plans to exit, let me welcome Olabode Shoumi, energy expert. Glad to have you join us again on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
So as the UAE plans its exit tomorrow, just a few hours from now, what implications for Nigeria, for OPEC, and are there pointers too for Nigeria?
Okay, thank you. I think to put this in context, let's look at the origin of OPEC itself. Because when oil production started, there wasn't any OPEC. But what basically happened then was that the people who had the technology for drilling and processing it were controlling oil. So basically, Saudi Arabia, UAE could drill as much oil as they want. The ExxonMobil, the Seven Sisters as they were known then, will buy the oil at the terms that they dictated. So oil was just like any other commodity, and if they didn't like it, they won't buy and all that. So it was even a female journalist, an American journalist, by the way, who advised the then prince in Saudi Arabia that they should form an association. And they formed the association, and on that basis, they didn't sell oil. I mean, they withheld oil, and that led to the 1973 crisis and all that and all that. The point is that every association has its purpose and has its benefits. So in terms of purpose, there are things like collective bargaining. There are things like ability to influence technology and all that. And of course, anything else that goes with associations. So which means that UAE is foregoing those benefits. Because at the end of the day, OPEC is not restricted, is not putting quotas simply for the sake of quotas. They are putting quotas so that supply does not outpace demand.
Yep.
We should not forget that there was a point in the 1980s where a barrel of water cost more than a barrel of oil. We did get to that stage. And of course, OPEC quotas have to come in, geopolitics have to come in, interactions have to come in, and then the thing elevated. And at a point in time, it also got to almost $150 per barrel. So at the end of the day, whatever the issues here, because I'm not privy to UAE internal decision making, but whatever decisions were made, it's not like the only consideration is that they can produce more oil. Because if they produce more oil and the price of oil falls, what was the benefit? Because if they do 5 million barrels per day and they are selling it for what would have been the cost of 2 million barrels per day 3 years ago,
it doesn't also serve their purpose.
It definitely doesn't serve their purpose.
Okay, we just have to quicken our conversation because of time.
Yeah.
Like you said, the OPEC relies on, of course, the collaborative discipline of members to be able to control global oil stability.
Yeah.
Now, if UAE does carry out its intentions, what does that do to the body of OPEC. I mean, if you look at EU, for instance, you discover that at the time, Britain was also part of EU. You discover that, look, this marriage is not, it's not doing me as much good as I wanted. So, Britain pulled out of the EU. We know what is happening in EU today. So, what might happen to
the impact?
Yes, and then what will be the impact on global oil stability?
Okay, so UAE will not be the first country that has exited. Okay. People have exited in the past, about 3, 4, and others came back.
So what makes EU's? Why is EU being? Why is it giving UAE? Why is it giving?
So that's why I'm saying I'm not privy to their own internal.
No, I think the reasons that have been adduced are that they have obligations to meet and they have suffered shocks, such as the one that Iran has caused.
It's triggering.
And then they have spent, I think, $150 billion to, investing in their oil infrastructure. They need to recoup, they need to push out, they need to meet the obligation. So this is just the basis.
Yes, but those are also things they could have discussed within OPEC meetings and their quota will have been raised. So, yes, I understand people must give reasons. They are always
then they have more capacity to produce. OPEC is limiting them.
Yes, but that has never been the basis for anybody living. So what I'm just saying is that those are official reasons.
Okay.
Because they can always have that discussion at OPEC meetings and say, this is the situation, we need to increase. Anybody can demand for increase in quota. I mean, if Nigeria meets its quota today and we feel that we have more, we will come up with reasons, discuss with OPEC, and it will be lifted up. It's not, it's an association.
It happens.
It does happen.
Yes.
It does happen. So what I'm trying to say that reason is not strong enough for wanting to pull out. There would be other issues. I mean, we can stay on that. I mean, it's official, but we will not be eating the meat, the very issues that is at stake.
Okay, let's look at how it affects us, because I mean that's the whole thing. Right now, the price of what Iran is doing to the price of oil, it's gone higher. Of course, like we said earlier, for us here in Nigeria, it will mean more money on paper. But I mean, how is Nigeria? Are we vulnerable to the shocks if it does happen?
We've always been vulnerable to the shocks of oil and gas prices. I mean, when there's an increase, there's usually we talk about oil windfall, like the Gulf or during the Gulf War when there was a windfall. When the prices go down, we talk about the fact that it affects the budget.
My vulnerability, I mean, I did say that we will get more money. I mean, obviously, it will affect us as well. But in terms of what happens, back home here to the ordinary man, how does that translate? How does that affect people like us?
Okay, so if there's a world war today, how does it affect us? It will affect us because there will be limitations in travel. It will affect us because global supply chain and all that. It doesn't affect your day-to-day activities, at least not immediate. So it's the same way. Fortunately, that Strait of Hormuz, Nigeria is not involved in that supply chain. So that's why you have not seen any impact in terms of our exports or in terms of our import processes. But what it has done is that it has affected the global oil price by increasing it. That impact we are feeling. So that's an example of an impact. But in terms of how it will affect the man on the street, at least not in the immediate. So UAE leaving OPEC, but what it's supposed to mean technically is that there will be greater volumes of crude oil in the market.
If we have more money, would it not translate to better
lower prices?
Lower prices, better.
But it never did.
No, but that's what I'm saying.
So that's a different. That's not an oil and gas issue. That's an economic issue. So when the money from oil and gas comes into the country, it goes into the treasury, the federation account. Then it becomes an issue of the the Office of Budget and Ministry of Finance and CBN. That is a different issue. That's not an oil and gas issue. And that's a decision, completely different decision. So in other words, in your home, you and your husband, you have an income. Your work here is not what determines your spending.
No, but that's a consequence. If your life improves,
it should be a consequence.
It's a
What I'm trying to
consequence.
say, what I'm trying to say, please understand me.
Yeah.
It should be a consequence. What I'm trying to say is that what you do in terms of your work does not necessarily translate to how you spend. You can choose to save the money. The decision to save or to spend has nothing to do with your work. It is a decision you make about your own spending. So what I'm trying to say is that the decision and the activities by the Ministry of Finance and the budget planning is not the same thing as income from oil and gas. The income is what they will spend, all right, but the decisions they make at that level is a different thing from the activities in the industry.
Now, what was the UAE's decision do? How does it affect OPEC, for instance? Does this suggest that OPEC's internal consensus is weakening? How does it affect OPEC membership, including Nigeria?
It doesn't, to that extent. It's not a crisis. First of all, like I said, people have exited. Gabon left before. They came back, left. I'm sure Gabon is not even there at the moment. Angola has left. People leave and people come. You get. People can leave for strategic reasons, do some things, and then come back. It's an association. I mean, for example, there's the Nigerian Union of Journalists. A particular journalist can decide, or a group.
I don't want to be a member.
You can. You understand? Why they would decide, it's always in their own, it's the reasons that they will know. They don't necessarily...
Maybe they don't want to pay the dues.
That's why.
Like you said, we are not privy to the internal
working. So what I'm saying is that we won't really know why they're doing that. As to whether it will affect OPEC, I don't think so. Because one person cannot be greater than the collective. And the UAE is not one of the first three in terms of either volumes that they are being produced. It is significant.
And it's a crack.
Because they don't produce as much as Venezuela, they don't produce as much as Saudi Arabia, they don't produce as much as Iran and all that. So yes, they produce and all that is significant, but it is not enough to cause a crack, to cause a crisis. It's just a member, it's a significant member pulling out. If Nigeria pulls out of OPEC, it is significant. But even we don't produce as much as the UAE. So it needs to be understood that an individual has its limitations in terms of his ability to affect the collective. What most of the analysts are talking about is the long-term implications and all that, which is basically one of the fundamental issues that is related to the purpose of OPEC, to protect the interest of the members.
Okay, let me just move away. You know, right now, COP is the conversation right now is on renewable energy. Do you see the global demand or the global push for more, utilization of renewable energy? Do you see us moving towards that? Even with whatever that is about to happen with UAE's withdrawal.
We've always been moving towards renewable energy, you understand? But the truth of the matter is that when the discussion about renewable energy is always being discussed, the limitations and the fundamentals is also not being discussed. Okay, the whole world went to COP. How did they get there? They went by plane, which means they used oil and gas. The cars they use, maybe half of them, maybe a quarter of them, it's still the same thing. That in other words, I'm not so sure anybody wants to fly a plane across the Pacific that is running by wind. What if there's a wind lull? A plane, you can't park it and say you want to check. You understand? What if there is solar eclipse? So we need to first. So you see, there's a limitation, and we talk about energy mix. So those who are pushing it at the expense of oil and gas also have their own agenda. So we don't need to necessarily be caught up in the agenda of people. We need to know what is important to us.
Absolutely.
So that we don't do a me too approach. Okay, these people are doing this. Okay, me too, I want to do this.
Absolutely. Just my last question.
I wanted to ask, could this trigger a situation where a shift where countries now begin to prioritize their national interests instead of that cartel bargain? Because if you ignore one, you could then ignore 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, and then there is
because
none.
national interest has always been fundamental.
First of all, OPEC interest is national interest, very fundamentally.
National
yes. To the collective of the members. It's like saying that what's ECOWAS interest? ECOWAS interest is the interest of the members. Those are fundamental issues. So the fact that it's an association does not mean the association's interest is antagonistic or against or different from the interest of the member nations. Like I said in the beginning, the very basis for OPEC was to ensure that the members have a voice when it comes to collective bargaining.
Okay, last question for me. Whatever happens, how might that affect investor confidence in the oil market?
It's not affecting investor confidence. It's not. I think people tend to think as investors as fragile babies who once they hear noise of armed robbers, they just go and hide behind it. Investors, by their nature, they invest in places
they take risks.
Yes, in places that normal human beings don't risk. Despite all the issues in the Niger Delta, have you heard of investors shying away from investing in oil and gas in Nigeria? They may shy away from construction and all that. But when it comes to oil and gas, where the real money is, nobody's shy to invest there. So investors don't just move like that. They are not really. Yes, there are certain, and the things that really affect fundamentals of investing are things like rule of law. Can they repatriate their money out? And not these kind of things.
Alabode Show me is an energy expert, and I'd like to thank you for coming to put us, enlighten us. Now we know that there's no cause for alarm, at least not yet.
Absolutely.
So there's no cause for alarm. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us on Good Morning Nigeria. And that's it for today, Good Morning Nigeria. Thank you for being part of it. Thank you for making this program your #1 every morning. And Victor, we have so many people who say you guys are doing well. Thank you. You're one of them.
All right. Your name is?
Claire Adelabu Abdurrazak.
And I am Victor. So we'll see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.